Welcome back to Social Media Day. Now we're going to talk rowing here at Indiana University. It's a young program getting better year in and year out. We find out later today whether or not they crack the top 20 for the first time, as they are off to a great start to the 2011 campaign. Steve Peterson, the head coach of Indiana Rowing, and I just found out, so now you're going to get another follower, at least one today here at Indiana Rowing. There is a Twitter account, and one of your assistants runs that, from what I understand.
I'm not the most technological person going. My assistant coach, Connie Kirsch, does run it.
Well, you say that,
Yes.
and now I'm going to pull out a tidbit from your past life. The Social Network came out. It should have won Best Picture. Instead, it was the King's Speech. But you actually know the Winklevosses who claimed that Facebook was stolen from them.
Yes, I do. They actually are training with the national team, and we crossed paths at the end of my national team career and coaching career, so yes.
No one is as technologically tied in as Coach Steve Peterson. I mean, come on. They came up with Facebook. You also can follow the rowing program at IU Shanadan. Shanadan did not go over well in the conference room here. So it's Shanadan, and she's got quite the following, and she is the athletic communications contact for the rowing program, and you can find out a lot about those student athletes that way. Coach, off to a nice start to the season, finished second in the Dale England Cup, finished just a second behind Louisville this past weekend, which is one of the best teams in the country. It's building here at Indiana.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the best year that Indiana Rowing has ever had. Our varsity, our top boat, our varsity 8 and our second varsity 8, those are our top two boats. Both have the most wins we've ever had. We're 13-3, 13-2 for those for the season. We've only lost, we've had the closest race that Michigan State has had this year, number 8 in the country. And so we're getting the job done. The kids are finally starting to gain confidence with the wins, and it's showing on the race course.
Well, and then looking kind of in the archives to help put together this showcase that's going to be taking place, a lot of your top performers last year were freshmen and sophomores, so it's a young team that's continuing to get better and better.
Yeah, I mean, we're a young team as a history. I mean, the team is only 10 years old, and in general, just the population of the team are a lot of sophomores. And so it's one of these things where it is building upon itself. And as I said, I think that the biggest obstacle we've had is anytime you're the first to do anything, it's hard. And so this past weekend we beat Iowa, which is a big deal for Indiana Rowing, beating another Big Ten school. And so each one of these weeks where we sit here and face off against a school like that in Louisville or Ohio State, whoever it happens to be, and take them down, it's just gaining more momentum.
All right, Row for Life writes in. Just a sec, let me scroll back as we've got an interactive element here. What do you feel it takes to be the best crew in the country?
It takes a bunch of things. I think obviously there's fitness and power and so forth. But probably the biggest thing is you have to work as a team. Our sport is not made up of superstars. Most people don't know who's in a crew. You know if the crew won, but you don't know who it is. And it's really just about getting the 9 individuals, the 8 rowers and the coxswain, the little person in the back, to work, move, think, act as one. I mean, an analogy I always use is you could have a Ferrari, but if the timing isn't right, it's not going to go all that fast. So that is probably the biggest thing, is getting the 8 rowers and coxswain on the same page as far as what your goals are, the technique, how you're going to do it, race plan. And that's probably one of the biggest things. You have to have the power and strength. But, yeah, that's probably it.
Well, you've got a comment from I'm on a boat. What kind of training goes into getting faster in rowing?
We are an endurance sport. Much like probably the closest similarity to swimming. We do a lot of volume work, a lot of mileage. The kids train. There's 4 days a week. We have twice a days, and then 2 days a week we have 1 practice a day. And each one of those, like when we're on the water, we're going probably 15 to 20 kilometers each practice. So it's a lot of volume and it's endurance. At the same time, power is an aspect to it. So we also spend a fair amount of time in the weight room and getting stronger. So it's a combination of a lot of different things.
Looking at your program as a spectator sport, Pat Kraft actually returned from the Dale England Cup, and he said it was one of the most enjoyable sporting events he's ever gone to at IU. And this is, a football guy who's been born and raised going to football games, and it really is, especially in person, out on Lake Lemon when the water is calm and the sun is rising. It's just a gorgeous sport to watch.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's the scenario, it's the weather, it's everything that's going on. I think it's just a little bit different than other sports, and I think that does make for an interesting thing for people to spend time watching. We also, I'll bash ourselves too. Those days where it's windy and cold, it's not always the nicest thing in the world. But I think just the symmetry that goes on with the sport and trying to get your boat moving as a crew is one of the things, at least, that I find.
I don't know how we talked your program into doing this a couple of years ago, but we took a couple of radio personalities out on the boat. And you mentioned the timing and the symmetry. Yes. And they were the only two off in the boat, and it took a sharp left turn.
Yes.
And we almost got in a little bit of trouble right there. Insurance rates might have risen a little bit. How do you train that? Because it is amazing the rhythm and the symmetry that those boats have.
Practice. I mean, that's what we do every day. Again, it's like we'll go out there and we'll have various workouts planned, and so there's a physiological component to it, but at the same time we're doing a lot of technique and drills to work on the timing so that we get the 8 rowers moving the hands the same way, the bodies the same way, getting the blades to enter water exactly the same and come out the same power application through the drive. That, again, is kind of what makes a boat go fast. And I think for the average person sitting on shore, sometimes that's not obvious. It's just like pull and that's it, or stroke is what everybody likes to yell. But it really is about timing and matching up. So.
And how important is the coxswain to that?
A coxswain, well, it's funny. We'll see if I get any coxswain's email calling in a second. A coxswain is not going to make a crew good, very simply. I mean, it takes the engine to go fast, and that's the rowers. But a coxswain can make the difference between a good crew and a great crew. They're kind of like they are the coach in the boat. I think one of the most interesting things that separates our sport from any other sport is on race day when we're sitting there and we push the crew off the dock to start doing their warm-up for the race. At that point, we're no longer allowed to communicate with the crew. So there's no timeouts and no yelling plays and things like that. So the coxswain in the boat becomes the coach. And she has to, one, get them through the warm-up, make sure that they're prepared physically, mentally, technically, and all that for the race, get them to the starting line. As simple as that sounds, sometimes it's not that easy. And then the race. And so we spend the year with the coxswain going through and essentially teaching them to become a coach. And if we do our jobs well, there's a little saying in our sport, if a coach does their job well, the coach is expendable by the time we get to championship season. The coxswains can take over everything.
Different sports have kind of reputations for being assigned to different regions. Maybe baseball is a southern sport, wrestling is a Midwestern sport. I think when people think of rowing or crew, they think of something on the East Coast.
Sure.
But the Big Ten, over the last 10, 15 years, has really made a commitment to being a top-flight conference. And talk about how hard it is to go in against teams from your own conference.
Oh, sure. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the East Coast was where it's at. And there was no questioning that. But literally, in the last 10 years, the Big Ten, Pac-10 has also gotten fairly strong, have arguably become the top 2 conferences in the country. There's 16 schools that are invited to the NCAAs each year. Typically, 4 or 5 at least are coming from each of those conferences. And that was one of the big things that drew me here 8 years ago to build this program was, okay, we're going to be sitting here on a regular basis with the top crews in the country. And that goes on to this day. I mean, we get into the top 20, I think that's 6 of the Big Ten schools in the top 20 schools in the country. So it has its pluses and minuses. There's no easy races, that's for sure. But at the same time, you also know when you're sitting there on the line next to a Big Ten opponent, you're racing one of the best in the country.
And talk about how that has paid off in recruiting, where the Big Ten's reputation has continued to grow, and Indiana rowing progressively has gotten better and better year in and year out.
It's helped. I mean, kids want to go to places, and I'm sure this is true of any sport, want to go to places where they're going to get better. And, just sitting there and saying we're in the Big Ten or that's a Big Ten school, kid knows that they're going to come here and definitely get a good education, but also get good coaching, good training, and prepare them if they want to try and make it on to the next level with the national team.
All right, Coach Peterson, thanks so much for joining us here today. You can follow rowing at Indiana Rowing or at IU Shawnadan. It's a great way to keep up with a program that is on the rise here at Indiana University. We hope later today they crack the top 20. One way or the other, they're getting better, and they're having the best season they've ever had with a good young team. So, Coach, thanks so much for stopping by here on Social Media Day.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a quick time out. We're going to talk water polo, one of the top 20 teams in the country, with Barry King coming up next here on Social Media Day.